Welcome to the Jesus Cartel. Don't ever do that again. I thought we talked about that. Only I get to clap.
I don't listen real well.
Oh, I am aware.
It's not that I'm non-compliant. I'm just blaming it on my old age, or
It's a lot of age to blame
COVID,
it
or
on.
Johnson and Johnson, or something like that.
Yeah, I'm hearing there's a thing called long COVID. I heard about that a few days ago for the first time.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was even a thing. And so
It's not a thing with me.
it may be. You keep trying to clap us in. What's been going on with you?
Things are good. We're in the month of July now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're in July, and I'm excited about that. Just full blown summertime. But today, I have all my family coming in.
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
I
So
didn't know that.
very excited about that. So Annalise and Elena are coming in from Dallas, but they're bringing in Baylin and Chechu. Yep.
You know what? Annalise did tell me about that. I forgot.
Yeah. So our foreign exchange student from 9 years ago, Baylin Russell, from Madrid, Spain, is come into town for the first time in 9 years, and she brought her boyfriend Chechu, that speaks no English at all. I think the only English word he knew was hibachi. But anyhow,
Does that count?
that was what he said.
Okay.
And so they went and ate hibachi for the first time. But anyhow, they're coming into town. So they've been in Dallas since Monday. They're coming in. And it's also, we're going to celebrate Annalise's birthday this weekend. And she hasn't had a birthday party in a long time. So she decided that we were throwing her a birthday party. So a lot of her friends are coming, and a lot of Lena's friends are coming. And we're having a party. I'm not sure if it's Friday or Saturday or both. But I know that I'm cooking Friday and Saturday, so whenever the people show up, we'll call it a party.
I can't remember if I was invited to that. I feel like I was. But I don't. Things like that don't stick out in my mind.
I remember
But
you were invited for the Saturday party.
I did talk to her on the phone for a while. You actually walked up on me talking to her, which was funny.
Yeah.
And Annalise, I want to let you know that you were on speakerphone, and he could not tell who I was talking to. He asked like 3 different people, and I finally had to show him your name on the phone.
Whatever. So he's extorting my daughter for money,
That's
and
true.
then didn't even remember she invited him to a party.
We didn't even talk about money. No, it's incredible, man. That's awesome. Good for her.
Yep.
How old is she?
So they're all coming
gonna
in.
Be 20.
So she will be 23.
3? Yeah.
Yep. And so man. So I'm excited about all them being in town.
Mm-hmm.
Excited about all the cooking that we get to do and hanging out and everything.
Yeah.
And then at the church on Sunday, we're keeping the vibe going, and we're having hamburgers and sausage on a bun and chips and dip and stuff on Sundays.
I heard that y'all's last service went really well. And
Man, it was probably the best service that we've had.
Yeah, I heard good things about it from a lot of people, so
Yep,
that's good.
top to bottom, man. Thrive Church is thriving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah.
I hope you never say that again.
Yeah, I think you came up with that.
Wow. Wow. No, I did not. Man, I'm excited Baylin's coming in.
Yeah.
So I grew up in an era where a lot of television shows, like I say children's television shows, had the appearance of foreign exchange students in them. That was like just a common theme for some years there. I don't know why. But the foreign exchange student was always really weird and it just never really worked out, you know. And so meeting Baylin, when Baylin first came to town, I guess I kind of had that kind of expectation, like this is not gonna go well, you know. Baylin was awesome though. Yeah. I really, really enjoyed Baylin, and I'm super glad that she's come back to visit. I think it's really cool that y'all have kept in touch so well over the years and things, and she was a lot of fun. She's got a very sweet spirit about her, and
Now I'll tell you a little story about that. Seeing how
Please.
it's just me and you and nobody listening.
Yep.
Man, when we talked about having foreign exchange student, you know, excited about that. When Baylin got there, we're very excited because she just has a great personality, and she, you know, really wanted to come to America and do these things, and so it was great. And but over the next little period of time, I found myself pulling back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you got another girl in your house. I guess she was probably 15 at the time. She's a sophomore in high school, and so just a little uncomfortable there. Even though I had $2, one the same age and one a year younger. But anyhow, so like when I'd go take a shower or whatever, and instead of fully clothed and then coming back in the house or in the living room to hang out with everybody, I may would just stay in my bedroom a little longer, or something like that. And so anyhow, Miss Becky came to me and she was like, "Hey, look, you're kind of secluding yourself a little bit, not nothing bad or anything, but this isn't going to work. We can't do this for 9 months, And so we had a family meeting, and I told Baylin, "Hey, this is my issue." And I said, and so the way that we can resolve it is if you just become my daughter. Mm-hmm. And I said, "If that's what you want." And she said that's what she wanted. And so then I just started treating her like one of mine. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't, anything that I would say or do around my kids, I said and did around her. Mm-hmm. And just treat her like my daughter. And that's when she became Baylin Russell. And that's when we became so close, Yeah. But just, having to navigate through that. Never done it before, mm-hmm. Not wanting to be intrusive or whatever. This isn't a girl that, grew up with me that knows, my actions and motivations and values and stuff. And so it took that little adjustment to really get it. But 9 years later, she's coming and staying in our house. I mean, that's proof that that's what happened.
Yeah.
So
that's really neat. She
became Baylin Russell, and it's really cool.
Yeah, I can't imagine having to navigate that.
Right.
That's a dynamic a lot of people will never experience, especially not just the physical reality of having a 15-year-old stranger move in, but a foreign 15-year-old stranger. That's a lot of things to be mindful of while you're maneuvering through and building a relationship, and then also it's like when I think about like someone moving in with you, I already know you. Mm-hmm. They have no knowledge of you whatsoever, and so they're going to make snap judgments from the first time they see you based on how you look, based on how your home is, and so there's a lot to process.
My reputation doesn't precede me like
correct.
It does normally around here.
Yeah, and even if someone did come and be like, "Oh man, Clay's such," it would mean nothing.
Right.
Would mean absolutely
nothing. Because you
nothing.
had no relationship with him.
Yeah.
So. And think about this. This is something else I was thinking about. So we stay in contact with Baylin, all of us as a family and everything. Mm-hmm. And the biggest deal for her is that Cooper's grown now, Mm-hmm. So Cooper's older now than she was when she left. Yeah. So this is difficult, to process for her and everything because he was baby Cooper, Mm-hmm. But think about it like this. So we've stayed in contact, we love her. We, FaceTime her at random times, and different things like that. When we hear Blue Isn't Your Color by Keith Urban, even if it's at 11 o'clock at night at a concert, we're sending videos, and stuff. But her boyfriend, Chechu, didn't know anything about this. Mm-hmm. So he didn't know he was coming, he didn't know anything till last Thursday. And he's never been to America before. Mm. And he knew about us, but he didn't know, that they were coming and all this. So anyhow, so he gets on a plane, 3 days later. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know how visas and all that work out, but 3 days later he gets on a plane, flies across the whole ocean, and lands in Dallas, and next thing you know, he's in the car with people he doesn't know. He's in a country he's never been to before. They're speaking a language that he doesn't speak. They're eating things that he's never ate before, and he has no clue where they're staying at, doesn't know what the plans are. He doesn't know anything. He can't drive. He can't do any of these things. And I'm like, man, this is a lot. And then all of a sudden I realized that this is every mission trip that I've ever been on. Mm-hmm. Because when you plan a vacation, you plan the hotel, you plan where you're going to eat at, you plan all these things. But when you plan a mission trip like this, you're basically just going and trusting that somebody's going to be at the airport to pick you up, mm-hmm. and that they got plans after that. But we're not from there. We can't make plans. We don't pick our own hotels. We don't pick our restaurants. We don't know the agenda and all that kind of stuff, because when we go as missionaries, we're just going as missionaries. Well, it's the same thing for him. And I was like, man, that's a lot for him to go through. And I was feeling bad for him. And I was like, wait, I've been in that same position like 50 times.
Yeah.
To where you got a phone number, and when you land in a country you've never been to before, you turn on your WhatsApp and you hope somebody responds,
Yeah.
or you really don't know where to go from there.
Yeah.
There's how many times have we been through customs and they ask you to fill out what hotel you're going to be at and stuff, and we just had to make it up.
Yeah.
Holiday Inn Airport,
Yeah.
and hope for the best.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, I'm looking forward to really getting to meet him. He seems like a great guy. And but I am, mindful that he's in a weird spot right now.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about when you were describing it. That was what was going through my mind is the trips that we've been on, and you just are putting your faith in somebody else's ability to care for you and care about you, and
Yes.
and so you essentially kind of have to be babysat to a degree, and so wow.
They went to a Rangers game last night, and Rangers won 6-0.
Does
And
he
so
even
they get
watch
to see
baseball? I
Well,
bet.
so I asked, does Chechu know anything about baseball? And she said the response was he really wanted to go watch the baseball game,
Okay.
and that he figured out every chant and every cheer and was really involved.
Yeah.
So I don't know, if they watch
Neat.
baseball or not in Madrid. I don't know if that's his deal or not, but I do know that he really enjoyed it last night.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, yeah. Well, congratulations, Chechu, on your journey to America.
So I got foreign exchange students and family coming in, and different people from all. Oh yeah, my sister's coming in from Atlanta. Forgot about that. My niece and nephew's been at the house.
Atlanta, Louisiana?
In Atlanta, Louisiana, and they're takes 7.5 hours to get there.
Yeah.
And so she's coming in today, and so she'll all be there too. I knew there was some more people, and I'm hoping Uncle Bobby's coming with her. We'll see. Him and I can talk stocks, because I just made a brilliant move the other day, and I would love to brag to somebody on that. So
You have already.
yeah, but I'd like to brag to somebody else. And so anyhow, somebody that I didn't take along with me in that brilliant move. And so anyhow, I'm excited about that too. So I got family coming in. I got people coming in from Atlanta. I got people coming in from New Orleans, and coming in from Dallas, Spain. We're throwing a big party, fireworks, boiled shrimp, barbecue, and all that. What do you got going on, Andrew?
Me and Arya will probably play some softball in the yard. Courtney too. And, we may play some Super Smash Bros. When it gets dark.
There you go.
We like to do that.
Okay.
Wouldn't mind fishing, but I got to go to church camp next week, so
Kinda hot for
the
that.
odds of me putting a boat on the water are slim. I say that. My family's coming with me, so there's that. That's what we're doing. We're celebrating by going to church camp.
Oh man, this is good stuff.
Yeah, I love church camp week. It's a lot of fun, man. It's
Yeah.
it's cool. I like to. A lot of times you get to see students experience the Lord in a new way for the first time, because I'll never forget my first church camp experience, because it was the first time I was surrounded by people who all wanted to pursue the Lord. And what it did was it gave me a glimpse into what life can be like. And so you have your everyday grind that most people experience, where it's just everybody's doing their own thing. If you're pursuing the Lord, you're doing it on your own. Maybe you go to church every now and then, but that's not all churches. Do you even really feel that same vibe? There's a lot of churches that you don't. And I'm not big on feelings, so that's not so problematic for me, so long as you're really pursuing Him in your own time. But the reality is there's not a lot of that with people. It's just not. And so when I went to church camp, it was the first time I was, there was hundreds of people who all wanted to be closer to Jesus. And it just hit me, the reality. It was like, this is what life can be like. If I would surround myself with a community of people like this, every day could be like this. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what that looked like. I was 12 years old the first time I experienced it, but I realized it was possible. And that never left my mind. Even though my life's journey took some weird turns and tumbles, I never forgot it. And now here I am all these years later and have built that I longed for. You know, I'm surrounded by people who are all pursuing Jesus, and I have that same just, it's almost like an ecstasy feeling of just being surrounded by people chasing after Jesus that you had at church camp all those years ago. I have just about every day now. You know, I get to experience the joys of pursuing him, the joys of seeing people pursue him and hit these breakthroughs and stuff. And that's a lot of what cross camp is, or church camp is people having breakthrough, either moving towards their intimacy, or people having breakthrough and recognizing some of the things that are holding them back. And that's what my life is, pretty much every day. And, you know, with that, you also got to go through some deep valleys with some people who are dealing with some traumatic experiences and some things that they're holding on to, and some unforgiveness. And that's a lot of that comes out at church camp, you know, for a lot of people. Things that they've never shared, things they've never talked about, those start to surface because they're experiencing the Holy Spirit in a way that's very tangible for the first time, a lot of them. That's my everyday. You know, I'm always dealing with people's, you know, past and their trauma, and they're letting go of some things. And so church camp has essentially become my life. And it can be everyone's if you'll navigate things a certain way. But that's what we're doing. But like as far as like the last week, you know, we've had some really cool moments. I shared a little bit with you. I shared some with the second phasers that I teach. But you know, Aria the other day asked for a Bible, and we got her a Bible, and it was so cool because when she got it, she started crying, and she was just so excited to have, you know, she had a kid's Bible. She wanted a real one, so we got her a real one. And when it got here, and she started crying, and then she immediately went and gifted her Bible to the 3-year-old, and you know, so I just got 3 kids super pumped up about having a Bible, and I mean all 3 of them pumped. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like not just like I have one, like all 3 of them proud, want to show people. Like we took the 5-year-old took hers to Pineville to show her friend in Pineville that she's got a Bible. That's just what she wanted to do. Yeah. You know, and I love that, man. I'm so excited about that. We've had some really cool moments with Aria these last few days where she said some really moving things. Life is good, man. Life is in a really good spot, and I'm just excited to see those continue moving. And I want to tell people, like, God speaks to these children. He wants to speak to you, but he speaks to these children. You need to listen to him. You need to pour into him. You need to trust that God speaks to him, because Aria has had as many or more supernatural moves from the Lord in her life at 8 than most people will have in their life, because they don't believe they can happen, right? And so they experience it very little. Aria believes that these things happen, and Aria listens. And you know, one of the weirdest things, but it was the coolest things that had ever happened with the Lord happened through Aria. She was, you know, I'm always dealing with situations and navigating situations for other people, and it's difficult because it's not my situation. You know, my situations are easy to navigate. I know exactly how to handle them 99% of the time. You know, it usually just looks like, what does perfect love look like in this moment? And I do that thing. And but when you're navigating situations with other people, well, I can control, you know, with your situation, you can control one variable, you. And that variable, as long as I'm walking in perfect love, hey, it doesn't really matter what the other person does. I just got to do the right thing. When you're dealing with other people's situations, you get to control neither variable. And so there's a lot happening. And so I remember there was this situation I was dealing with, and I wasn't sure what to do with it. You know, there was a lot at stake, and I was just kind of in a place where I was in the middle on it, and I didn't know how I was going to handle it or where I was going to go. Well, Aria, all of my kids, they sleep with stuffed animals, and they just kind of rotate the stuffed animal they like the most at the time. And at the time, Aria was infatuated with this little rabbit. And we have we got rules and standards at our house that we follow and that we keep. You know, it just is what it is. People can think whatever they want to think about them, but it builds your children up to having accountability and taking responsibility for their actions and things. It's good. And so one of the things at our house is, when it's time for bed, it's time for bed. If we don't know where our rabbit is when it's time for bed, we just don't have a rabbit that night. You know, you could have put the rabbit back when you got up in the morning That way it would be there when you went to bed. You chose not to do that, and so for tonight, we're going to be without a rabbit. And that's okay. You know, it builds accountability. And so she goes to bed that night without her rabbit, and she was not happy about it, but she understands this is the standard that we set. And so she goes to sleep. Me and Courtney are in bed, and she pops in her room like an hour or two later. She woke up from a dream, and she tells me and Courtney that God told her to tell us something. And she spits out to me exactly how that situation needed to be handled. And I knew instantly. I was like, this is for me. This is for me. And I'm just kind of like shocked. You know what I mean? She wakes up from a dream, comes in here, and is like, hey, God told me to tell you this. Like, we weren't talking about, God told me to tell you this. She tells me, I'm like, okay, I'm listening. And then she goes, and he also said, my rabbit is on the swing set outside. And it's just like, I'm just kind of processing all this information. And then she's like, can we go get it? And at this point, you gotta, gotta go get it. So Courtney goes outside with her, and that rabbit is sitting up on the swing set outside. And it was just like, two things. One, God clearly speaking supernaturally to the child. Two, the rabbit was of no consequence to anything. But God cares about the things that we care about.
That's right.
And something else just to remember is that while God was delivering a supernatural message that I very much needed, he also delivered something to her that she didn't need, she wanted.
Yeah.
God cares about those things. And it's one of those deals when you hear that story, most people, they're just going to write that off. It's like, oh, okay, whatever. Dude, I've experienced that too much. Like, that's not a one-off. We see things like that happen in our family all the time. And, I'm just telling you, he's real. He's out there. He cares. And there's big things are happening in the Skull family with the Skull girls and, Maddox too. But he's just,
We talked about last week at church, when you talk about prayer, the very first thing that enters your mind is you telling God what you need,
Sure.
And, but I asked them, I said, when you pray before your meals, what do you do as soon as you get through praying before your meal? And they said that you eat. And I said, that's right. And when you pray right before you go to bed, what do? You go to sleep, right? And so if you're praying before all your meals, and if you're praying before you go to sleep at night, there's no time for listening there. And so we need to develop some time to where we're listening for God, because we say that God's ways are higher than our ways, but then we want to just tell God what we need, what we can understand that we need, and then we expect him to do it, but we're not listening. And a quote from last week was that prayer is the difference from everything that you can do and what God can do. And so if we're going to do it on our own anyhow, then why are we even talking to God? Well, we're talking to God because we think it's the right thing to do. But if we're not listening to God, and that's what the difference in what Arya did.
Yeah, that's right.
She was listening to God. And that in itself is a big deal for an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Hey, she wanted a rabbit. She didn't want her parents to be upset. She whatever it is, but she listens. She does what she's supposed to do. She goes to bed, and then God's able to speak to her, and she's listening. And then not only does she listen, but then she's obedient to come tell you what God told her.
That's right.
And that's a big deal. Now, the other big deal of that is that you listened to God through her.
That's true.
And
I actually consider that.
That's a big deal. And that's one of the things that I see the strongest in the story, is that you as her dad listened to God through her. And just a counter story, yesterday I had a young man that's raising his daughter by himself. He hasn't always raised her. He's raising her by himself right now. and there was an instance of something that happened, and he was a little, bothered by it, and he told her, hey, here's the consequences. This is what we're going to do, and she understood, she understood, hey, this is what happened, this is my consequences and all that. But because of those consequences, it really put her in a bad spot moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was upset about that.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we had to give these consequences. And because of that, it really puts her in a bad spot moving forward. And he said, and that's what she's upset about, and that's what I'm upset about, is because of her punishment or the consequences or whatever. But it does affect her moving forward. And so he's like, well, what should I do? And I said, well, you shouldn't have gave her the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Not because of how it affects moving forward, but because what she did didn't deserve consequences.
Mm-hmm.
What she did really deserved to be celebrated.
Mm-hmm.
And he started to see.
Mm-hmm.
I said, just because, and I said, you saw it this way, but if you're asking me my opinion, I look at it this way.
Mm.
And he said, man, you're exactly right. And he said, you're exactly right. And I said, you just asked. I'm not trying to butt in your business.
Mm-hmm.
You just asked, but I see it different. And I see it as she did really good in this situation. You see it as she didn't, and because of that, you're given these consequences, which is going to cause long-term effect. And I said, so anyhow, he said, well, what'd I do? And I said, well, you got a couple options. You can roll with it.
Mm-hmm.
We'll pray that God works it out and everything, and try to manipulate it to work out in her favor or whatever. I said, or you could go to her and say, hey, look, this happened. I saw it this way, but it really didn't sit well in my spirit, and I appreciate how you handled it because you took correction 100%. You took the punishment 100%, and but because it didn't really sit well with me, I went and talked to Mr. Clay and asked him what he thought, and he told me that I was wrong, and that this is the way I should have handled it. And so now, if it's okay with you, I would like to try to do it from that angle, and go back and fix what I broke.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, now you don't have to, but that's an option.
Sure.
And he wanted to. He said, man, I'm all about it and everything. And he said, man, if that's gonna help, and I said, well, it will, And so anyhow, hey, as a father, to go say, hey, I went and talked to another father and realized I was wrong about this. I handled it wrong. I should have handled this different, and be able to admit that to your kid and rectify the situation. Now remember, this isn't her trying to get her way or anything like that. She accepted it 100%. Hey, you're right, and if that's how you feel, I understand. But it had other effects, that he was short-sighted on and didn't understand. And so anyhow, I hadn't talked to him today to see how it went, but I'm sure that he went and told her that last night. And for a child to see a parent, we're not talking about a struggling parent here. We're talking about a good, solid parent that's just still learning. We've talked about that. My kids are raised. Your kids are being raised. There's things that we learn from those that come before us, and there's things that you've learned from us, and then there's things people are learning from you. And so we got to be able to learn. But for his daughter to see that, hey, my dad admitted that he didn't see this the right way, and that he had to go seek counsel about it, and that he decided to do what his counsel said. All those things, man, we just really helped their relationship a ton.
Yeah.
Same way with Aria. When Aria comes in and you're like, man, that's the Lord speaking through you right there, and I needed to receive that. Man, that number one lets her know that was the Lord speaking to her because it's confirmed by her daddy. And then number two, that her daddy recognizes those gifts and talents in her, and that you respect her opinion and what God's doing in her life. Those are all huge things.
Yep. Yep. And she was 7 when that happened.
Right.
And it wasn't long after that. I'm pretty sure I got the timeline right. I know she was 7 when this happened too, but she's also the one who led our 5-year-old to the Lord. Also in the middle of the night. She just walked her into our room one night, like 10:30 or something, my kids go to bed at 8. And so they walked in the room about 10:30, and she looked at me and Courtney and goes, I think she's ready. And we were like, what are you talking about? She goes, to be baptized. And we're like, what? And so we pour into this conversation with the 5-year-old. Turns out that's exactly what had happened. Amen. So our 7-year-old was ministering to our 5-year-old in depth.
Yeah.
And you can't create this. Only God can do the things that he's done. And as I was telling the guys in second phase, and I look at where my life was at one point, if you'd have told me that we'd ever be where we are now, there's no way I could have fathomed the jump, but here we are, and it's because he's good. And it's all about surrender. Surrender is the only thing that is stopping you from walking in the fullness of everything that he has for you. How much of you are you trying to hold on to? If you can let it all go, let him all have it. You were talking about prayer, and how people pray essentially for things for themselves. And it's true. Most people do. But the Christians that I know that are really walking in step with the Lord, very rarely, if at all, ask for things for themselves. Only when things are first arriving do you really see people who are deeply rooted asking for things for themselves. And it's usually not the things that you'd expect them to ask. It's usually more for things like peace in the midst of it. Yeah. They're normally not asking for a fix. They're normally asking to be able to reflect his character through whatever it is that they're going through. Yeah. The majority of my prayer life is me thanking God that it is no longer I that live, but he that lives in me, and that everything that happens today isn't going to be what Andrew would have done. It's going to be what Jesus would have done. And it's a prayer of thankfulness for that. 90% of my prayer is that. Let's go from 90 to 98. The 8% after that is usually me praying for stuff for other people, not my family. People that I see are in need, people that I see are having struggles, things that they're getting. And maybe the last 2% will have some current events from the Skull family tied into it, but that is very rare. Maybe once a week. And again, it's usually because something new has been presented. There may be something I pray for my family. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do that. I'm just telling you that the more rooted I've gotten in Christ, the less I've prayed for myself. And there seems to be a correlation there with the people that I know that have been walking it out for a while. Yep. And you see that too?
Yeah, I experienced that in my life. In fact, so much on the other side that a couple years ago, through studying the prayer of Jabez, Jesus told me, or God told me, that I was probably out of whack with that a little bit too much. That I should spend more time praying for my family and stuff, because I went the whole other way,
Sure. Yeah, I know what you mean.
It was probably in that 1 or 2%, and probably needed to be more like 5 or 10%, And I spent a lot of time thanking God, but I'm not, at 90% on that. I'm probably more, I'd say a little more 40 or 50% on that. Most of my prayers probably half of them are specifically for other people. Yeah. In their certain situations, in their everyday life, in what they're doing. And it's just part of who I am, as a pastor and stuff. I thank God for all he's doing in our lives and what he's got going on. And that's, kind of the way I walk around. But I intentionally pray for other people a lot.
That's good.
Some that they know and some that they don't know.
Sure. Well, this is kind of what I wanted to talk about today, was a behind-the-scenes look at what ministry is and what the life of, because both of us would be considered people who are in ministry. And most people don't really recognize or realize what that life looks like. And, you're talking about how, my prayer kind of leans 90% one way and yours is more like 50%. There's a reason that mine's 90 and not 50. It's not because there's anything wrong with yours being 50. It's because I tend to get overwhelmed jumping from people's needs to people's needs to people's needs. And so it's like I can't stop. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Because I know so many people. And so if I start praying for this guy's situation here, then another person comes to mind. And what ends up happening is, in my mind, which I know isn't true, it isn't the reality, which is why I've shifted the way that I pray, so that my mind doesn't overtake the reality of what is. I start to feel guilty about people that I didn't get a chance to specifically pray for. And so what I do instead is thank the Lord for what he's done and what he's accomplished. And I just know that I pray that he equips me to speak into the lives of those people around me, rather than say, all right, Lord, here's the situation for, Ron, here's the situation for Jim, here's the situation for, because I overwhelm myself. Mm-hmm. He's not overwhelmed. I overwhelm myself. And so that's kind of, why I lean more towards hey, I'm glad that Andrew doesn't have to deal with this. Yeah. I'm glad that Jesus is the one who's dealing with this. And I thank you that Andrew's not here anymore and that it's all Jesus that's here. And God, I just pray that through this vessel, you would just make yourself manifest in all of these situations and everybody that I encounter today, Lord, that you would make clear the direction that I need to go to speak into their lives properly, that every word that I speak would be directly from you to them, that it would guide them into the fullness of what you have for them. That's kind of how I pray for people. And occasionally, when somebody comes to me specifically, which happens every day, which is why it runs around the 8%, because people are going to come to me every day and say, hey, I'm dealing with this. And we will pray specifically for those things I encountered that day. But I can't pray for 3 days ago's things and yesterday's things. And, it just, my mind will get, way out of whack. And so.
Well, here's where my mind gets way out of whack. If I concentrate so much on how great God is and what he's done and those things, then my mind starts thinking a little too much about how great my life is, because I owe it all to him.
Sure.
And it's not based on what I've done. So the more that I praise the Lord and the more, I focus on how great he is and all that, the more I start thinking about how great my life is and what he's done in my life. And to me, that gets overwhelming.
I see.
Because I cannot, it's hard for me to understand that. Well, let me back up. It's not hard for me to understand it because I see it every day. Mm-hmm. But if I dwell on how great my life is and what God's done in my life and all the different things, it can get overwhelming to me. So I have to take that bits by pieces, bits and pieces. And it's kind of the same way, you heard me say before, and somebody tells me I'm doing a good job or I mean a lot to them or whatever, man, I'm cool with that. I like compliments. I think we should build up the body of Christ. I think we should do that. But then when they say that next line, that's when it's difficult for me. I enjoy the regular compliment, but when they try to get a little too deep into that compliment, it bothers me. Well, it's kind of the same way. I can acknowledge that God is great and, and praise him, and I do that a lot. But if I start focusing on, well, why is he great? Mm-hmm. Or why, then it can get overwhelming at times to me because he has been so good to me. Mm-hmm. And so my combat is to get it off of me and off of my situation, even the good, and focus on other people and their needs and what God needs to, what we think that God needs to do in their life, or whatever. So anyhow, that's kind of just a different mindset there.
Yeah. And so prayer, that's the first part. Yeah. When you are in ministry, prayer is a big part of your life. It's not something small. It's not something passive. Everything that we're saying here, just be clear, this is not us trying to puff ourselves up. I'm just trying to share with you the realities of what this looks like. I spend no less than half an hour a day praying, no less. But it's probably more realistically between 1 and 2 hours. I would think that would be a fair assessment, just depending on the day. And on my busiest days, there's still half an hour of prayer that happens. It's not a religious thing. I don't have a half-hour timer set. I know how I am. I know, kind of where I will find space to pray, even when I don't have time. And it falls about a half-hour mark when you accumulate it. And most days, almost every day, I do pray more than that. But on the days where I'm just floored, beginning to end, I'm still going to find half an hour in there. And so I think that prayer, first off, is something that is like greatly undervalued in the kingdom. I think that people don't spend enough time doing it. I think it has become religious obligation for a lot of people, where they're praying because they feel like they have to. And that's messy feeling. It doesn't build up your relationship with the Lord. It creates some weird tension or obligation feeling, both ways, kind of.
And burnout will happen.
Yeah, and I've been there, so no rocks thrown. I get it. Now I go to the Lord because I want to go to the Lord. Sometimes I'll be listening to a sermon, a really good one or something like that, and I'll just want to turn the sermon off and pray. Like that's a thing that I want to do. It's not a thing I feel like I have to do. It's like, hey man, as jam up as this sermon is, and it's feeding my spirit.
Right.
I really want to be praying right now, and I'll just cut it off, and I'll start praying for a while, and until it feels like it's come to a place where I've said whatever needed to be said, but I've also given time to listen and just hear, and then we'll let that settle, and that's really cool. And so I think that's one thing that's greatly overlooked. Do you have anything on your mind that you think is over, like, kind of behind the scenes ministry things?
So last night we got invited to go to an anniversary supper for some friends of ours, and so it was 3 couples went to go eat at a restaurant that we'd never been to before. And so we went to Monroe, dressed up a little bit, went to this restaurant we're not used to going to. It was a smaller type place, so people, real close to each other and stuff. And we just, we laughed and told stories and had a good time. And we ordered a bunch of food, and we ordered a lot of different appetizers, and then we ordered a food, and we all kind of shared food together and just had a good time and everything. And so our waitress was really good, and she was super helpful, and she was really good. And so when she was about to bring the checks, she said, "Hey, I got a question for you." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "Are you a pastor?" And so a lot of times I get a question like, "Hey, I just figured out who you are," or something, because we run a lot of commercials. I went to go see a family the other day that loved one had just passed away, and there was a family there from Monroe, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we know you're at Fresh Start because of your commercials," And so I thought that's kind of where she was going with it, and she said, I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she said, "Where do you pastor at?" And I told her that, we just started a new church south of Monroe there. And she said, "Okay." She said, "I didn't mean to eavesdrop on y'all's conversation." And I said, "No, it's good to ear hustle sometimes." And so, but where I'm going with that is she didn't recognize me from TV. She didn't know me from anywhere else. She just heard our conversations, and I don't know exactly what conversation she heard. We talked about a lot of stuff, and everybody at the table was a Christian, but at the same time, she picked me out to be a pastor. And so to me, that's that transformation process that God is doing, that we see, that where God is, everybody is called to minister, but not everybody is called to pastor. And I hear that term used all the way around, and everybody's a pastor, just like everybody gets a free car on, Oprah or whatever. But it's not. I don't see it that way.
Yeah.
I see that everybody is called to minister and to love on people, but I don't see it as everybody's called to pastor. And I think it's a special anointing that God is doing in people's lives and stuff. And so the behind the scenes side of that is when you're a pastor, you're a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're in front of the congregation, whether you're at Walmart, whether you're at, a brand new restaurant or wherever you are, and to be honest, your life should resemble that.
Agreed.
Wherever you are. We wasn't trying to, we weren't trying to lead people to the Lord last night. We were just having conversations.
Yeah.
And because of the conversations that we have, then she was able, and like I said, everybody at the table strong. Everybody at the table loves the Lord. But out of everybody at the table, something in her spirit told her that I was a pastor.
Yeah.
And then she appreciated our what I do for the Lord and stuff, and so, good night. But I guess that's one of the behind the scenes deals is it's not the job of the pastor just to preach on Sundays,
Mm-hmm.
but it's to pastor and lead the people around him. And God is doing that in both of our lives, and it's really cool.
Yeah. Another thing that you kind of touched on there is that you have to live above reproach. As a minister, your life is under a microscope. Everybody's looking at everything that you're doing. You misstep even slightly, it has a wave effect, and that ripple effect will touch everything else that you're doing. And so, let's say that Clay preaches faithfully at Thrive Church for the next 20 years, and then he gets caught selling drugs. 20 years unraveled in a moment, And so it's one of those things where you can't afford to misstep at all. And a lot of times I see people withdraw from fully surrendering to the Lord because they don't want to subject themselves to that microscope. And the reality is they know, most people know, that there are a few things that I'd like to hold on to, and I'd really not like to experience condemnation over it. And so long as I don't fully surrender, nobody's going to expect me to let go of everything. And I'm just going to say, that's a coward's way to live. Get over yourself. I'm not trying to be ugly. I'm just saying that, if you think that that's pleasing to the Lord, you're wrong. It's not a good thing.
Well, as a pastor, that's one of the hardest things to deal with.
Yeah.
Is somebody that the Lord knows them, they know the Lord loves them, they love the Lord, and you want to see them do great in life, but because they're still trying to hold on to something and not surrendering 100%, then God can't do his best in their life.
That's right.
And then they're struggling, and but I texted a guy yesterday. I said, hey man, you've been on my mind. I haven't talked to him in 2 months. Hey man, you've been on my mind. He said, I said, how are things? And he says, not great, but I'm holding on. I was like, man, I hate to hear that. I want to see you knocking it out of the park, And as a pastor, that's the difficult thing, because I can tell you, the reason why things aren't going great isn't because he couldn't get a good job. It isn't because he got some kind of disease. It isn't because, no, I can tell you the reason why he's not doing great. Because he held on to something that he didn't release, and it's causing him problems.
That's right.
I mean, I already know. Without even talking to him, I know that's what it is, you know. And for him, it might have been his pride, because that was an issue that he had, that he never got rid of that pride. And because he didn't get rid of it and didn't humble himself the way he was supposed to, he wasn't able to finish things and stay in certain places. He had to move around a little too much because he had a little too much of him in him, And so as a pastor, it's one of the most difficult things is to see somebody that God's got great plans for. They know that God's got great plans for them. They're not blinded by the darkness, but they're in his marvelous light. But at the same time, they're not being completely surrendered. And because of that, they're going to end up getting cut up by the enemy. And not only them, but the people around them too.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. And look at the example you're leaving for your kids too. Yeah. If that's what you're doing, is holding on to something, then you're inadvertently or without knowing, you're subliminally giving them permission to do the exact same thing. And so they're going to grow up as Christians who don't fully surrender, but also hold on to things until they encounter something or someone who can help them through it. But man, wouldn't it be better if you did it? Wouldn't it be better if you were the one who gave them permission to fully surrender? And man, I'm seeing a lot of pride and ego cut people up right now. There's a lot of people who know that what they're doing isn't of the Lord. They're not doing anything intentionally evil or wicked, but they do know they're not following the path that God's got cut out for them. They're doing it anyways. Everybody who loves the Lord and is poured into their life is telling them not to do what they're doing. They're like, hey, to heck with all them. I'm still going to do this. And, it's tough, man. Next thing I would say, for sure, conservatively, I'm going to say 2 hours, but every day I spend 2 to 3 hours on average counseling people. Mm-hmm. This is a daily thing. This is Sunday through Saturday. It's not, my phone is always going to ring that much, and on the rare occasion that it doesn't, I'm going to go check on people. And so if my phone is just quiet today, for whatever reason, which it's not going, it started 5 a.m. But if it was quiet today, I'd be thinking about people I hadn't seen in a while that I normally see. I did it a couple days ago. There was a guy I hadn't seen, and I just said, and you'll usually get this message from me if I'm worried about you. Say, hey man, you alive? Mm-hmm. And he hit me back and told me there were some things going on, and I was like, well, let me know. Yeah, or let's get lunch sometime. He's like, well, yeah, just let me know when you're free. I said, what are you doing today? We went and we met for lunch and we hung out and we talked, and it's usually, there's a wasp. Wasp tried to sneak up on me, man. It's usually not something that I choose. It usually seeks me out. But even on days where it doesn't seek me out, I intentionally spend time pouring into people that are having difficult times.
So we started filming this morning at 7:30, and before we started filming, I got a text from our Facebook Messenger from a young lady that said, hey, look, I know that when we fast, we're not supposed to announce it to the world and stuff, mm-hmm. but is it okay for me to let you know as my pastor, mm-hmm. so that you can be praying for me and stuff? Great question.
That's a fair question.
And I love it. And so responding to her this morning before we even show the show, we've done a lot more, this morning, met with all the guys this morning, different things like that. But just saying, hey, this is a congregation member that has a question, and we're available for her to be able to ask that question and answer, mm-hmm. and great question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm talking about individual counseling. Yeah. I'm not even talking about group.
Right.
That's a whole nother shebang.
Yeah. So we spend a lot of time in counsel, and the range of questions that we get as a pastor has everything to do with pills that you can take to therapeutic things to biblical things, to relationships, to retirement, to I don't know of any topic.
Yeah,
nothing's
off limits.
No, I can't think. I can't think of any topic that I haven't been asked in counsel. People want to know what they want to know, and as your pastor or as a pastor, they trust you to give them that answer. Regardless of what topic it is.
Yep. That's true. It's expected.
It is. I mean, I remember growing up and somebody very close to me was a pastor. But I knew, because of circumstances, that they had difficulties with money. Mm-hmm. They were behind on their bills. They would get stuff repossessed, different things like that. And for me, I couldn't respect that. Mm-hmm. Just like, it's hard for you to respect somebody that doesn't take care of their body and stuff, and that's what I was going to say.
I hope that's what you were going to say. You made me nervous. There are ways you could have worded that would have been worse.
That's right. Yeah. And so anyhow, but as a pastor, you got to be solid on as many areas as you can.
Yeah.
And even the areas that you aren't necessarily solid on, it's not because you were holding back. Mm-hmm. I may not know everything about plumbing, but it has nothing to do with me holding back and not being surrendered in the area.
Sure.
So as a pastor, I'm not saying that you have to know everything about everything, But I am saying that when you aren't able to speak on a certain area, it isn't because you didn't surrender in that area or you didn't hold back.
I agree with that. Yep.
Anyhow, man, I love it. There's a lot of behind the scenes things that we deal with every day.
Yeah, and so just kind of hit a few things, just because we're not out of time, but we are starting to run short on time because of our schedules. 1 to 2 hours of prayer, pretty standard. 2 to 3 hours of counseling / checking on people if people aren't calling you. That's pretty standard. Spending time in the Word every day. I don't put a timer on it. Sometimes it's short, sometimes it's long, but every day we're definitely spending time in the Word. Put yourself in public circles. You're not meant to be a recluse as a minister. That people should be able to access you. You should be around. You should be seen. Don't hide. Balancing everybody's ideas. That's very difficult in ministry because you have so many conflicting ideas that are both well-intentioned. You got to navigate those things. This guy at your church thinks that we should be doing more contemporary worship, get a full band, while this person says they'd really like it if we do more hymns. You love both people. Both people have excellent points for why they want what they want, but you got to find a way to balance those ideas. Those things can be difficult and they're time consuming. It's not as simple as, hey, that won't make everybody happy and send a message, because happiness is not what we're after. We're after kingdom expansion. And so those things take time and they happen every single day. Pouring into your family. You still have that responsibility as a minister. That doesn't go away just because you're pouring into everybody else. You got to pour into your family. They're an incredible resource. Building the kingdom financially is something I spend time doing every day. I probably spend half an hour a day looking at my finances and trying to figure out how to take what I have and maximize it towards the most benefit for the kingdom in the long run. This involves, investing, moving things around, changing some things with the 501c3, reaching out to my board members, pitching ideas around, just seeing how we can continue to build. And that's just a few things that people don't really get to look at. A lot of times people think minister, they think a guy who collects a paycheck, preaches once or twice a week, and doesn't really have anything else to do. Maybe writes a sermon or two, and it really couldn't be further from that. And you talking about all of the wide spectrum of things that we're expected to answer and be knowledgeable about. It's true, but you also got to have the humility sometimes, because I would say that 90% of questions have answers, like really solid biblical foundation answers. Some of them don't, right. And you got to have the humility as a pastor to say, like, hey, look, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not exactly sure on this. I would be happy to try to seek this answer out and reach out to some people a little smarter than me. And then there's some things that we just aren't going to know right now. It's not because God has hidden them. It's because there's just not clear answers on everything. Everything doesn't have a definitive black and white. And a lot of times the questions that people are asking, they're asking because there's no definitive answer.
And I have no issue with that. I have no issue with not knowing an answer or deferring to somebody. Where I have an issue is, as a minister, is that I can't answer it because of something that I've done wrong in my life.
Oh, I agree.
Or something that I've refused to take care of in my life. Like you said, whether it's, people come to you, wanting to know, how to exercise better, but you don't know, or, they want to come to you about fasting, but you haven't been fasting, or they want to come to you about prayer life, but you really don't have that strong of a prayer life, or reading the word, or, those kind of things. I mean, when the young lady asked me about fasting, man, as soon as she asked me, I lit up. Why? Because that's part of my regular everyday life. I can answer a question on fasting.
That's good.
That's good. But if she asked me something about, reading the Bible and everything, and then all of a sudden I'm like, man, I really don't read the Bible, well, then we got a problem.
Yeah.
So as a pastor, we got to be ready. I'm not saying to have all the answers. I'm saying we got to be ready to provide those that help and stuff. And you said about the family, and like I said, I've raised my family and everything, and I've heard this throughout the years, but I've heard it more and more now, that some people respect me just off of the results of how I raised my family. So there's some people that believe me and believe in me and trust in me that really don't have a relationship with me. They just see the end results of what my family has become.
That's right.
And so it's very important. So we cannot forget, our family. Like when you talked about, hey, what's going on? The first thing that comes to my mind is my girls are coming. Mm-hmm. And it's not just Annalise and Elena, but Bailey's coming and Sydney's coming and and Blake's coming and Amelia's coming and Avery's coming, and all these girls that have been around and they help raise and stuff. They're all coming,
That's good.
and they're all great and doing outstanding.
And some people are just now starting to respect you,
Right?
Because you're hitting, I don't want to say a definitive finished result, but your older two is fairly definitive. They got around the big bad wolf somehow.
Made it through their teenage years.
Somehow they became career adults without going through and hitting rock bottom like everybody else.
Right.
And which was something that many people said was going to happen. They're predestined to fall at some point, and to be able to see that didn't happen and isn't happening, man, it's such a big deal. And I'm on the beginnings of that journey, but while it's not a finished result yet, I'll tell you that the people who had huge issues with the way I chose to raise my family in the beginning, my kids are still their favorite kids. You compare them to everybody else, and they would never say it out loud to the world, but they say it to me. And my kids are their favorite kids. Well, you sure did chastise me for the choices that I was making to make them your favorite kids. And
it wasn't on accident.
Yeah, and everybody's oh man, you're so lucky. It's like it's not lucky. It's not lucky. God
forget.
is good.
Yeah, they forget because they were wrong. So they choose to forget.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
So.
But anyways, I'm good. You good?
I'm good. It's
Praise
good to
God.
see y'all. Love y'all.
Good.
See y'all next time.